Welcome to Parenting Decoded, a podcast for practical approaches to parenting. I'm Mary Eschen. We as parents often struggle with kids who we think aren't trying their hardest, and we want to push harder. We know they can do more. It's a natural instinct to push. But in today's world, it seems like we can go too far and wind up doing more harm than good. After hearing the horrible stories with the college admissions scandal a few years ago and what some uber-wealthy parents were willing to do to push their kids into top-notch universities, Dr. Hank Weisinger, who happens to be a best-selling author of books for adults like Performing Under Pressure, decided to partner with a leader in positive youth development, Dr. Chris Thurber, a psychologist who's been an instructor at Phillips Exeter Academy for 20 years. Both have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to pressure and wanted to make a difference for our kids. Together, they've written a new book, The Unlikely Art of Parental Pressure, a positive approach to pushing your child to be their best self. This book provides a roadmap for parents to engage in healthy pressure with our kids, ways that will help them grow and succeed instead of stifle or crush them. In this episode, I talk with Dr. Weisinger about their approach of transforming harmful pressure into healthy pressure. There's a link to the book in the show notes if you'd like to read more after listening to this fun podcast. Here you go. I am so happy to have on my show today Dr. Hank Weisinger, who has written a new book with Dr. Chris Thurber called The Unlikely Art of Parental Pressure. And I wanted to give Hank an opportunity to tell him why this book, why now? What was the goal?
Well, the goal, first of all, let me mention just the title. We call it The Unlikely Art because the sad truth is that it's rare that a parent these days is exerting what we would call healthy parental pressure. We wrote the book to bring awareness to the fact that parental pressure has become a global pandemic. Studies around the world, whether it's from China, UK, Japan, Australia, Germany, the findings are always the same, is that kids are experiencing severe mental health issues because of the unhealthy parental pressure that is exerted upon them. So we wrote the book to bring attention to that fact and to give parents strategies where they can transform unhealthy parental pressure into what we would call healthy parental pressure.
It's awesome. And when I read the book, I was really impressed with your approach to have some positive ideas. Mm-hmm. Because the parents that I work with in Silicon Valley, we feel pressure from each other to put pressure on our kids. And I love the way that you help reframe, and you call it transformations. There's 8 steps to transforming from a pressure parent to what you call a supportive parent. And I want to spend some time talking about those different steps so that people have a flavor for what they could get out of the book.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize that just the concept of pressure, to remember, is a force. It's a physical entity. And just like pressure, physical pressure can be transformed, gas pressure, water pressure, all different types, so can parental pressure, which is inherent in every parent-child relationship. You cannot have parental pressure absent in a parent-child relationship because it has evolutionary utility. Think of it as a force that is pushing the child down a path that is going to help that child achieve success. So thousands of years ago, the parents who, quote, pressured their kid to learn how to fish and hunt, they were giving that child an edge to succeed. Just like parents today in Silicon Valley will pressure their kids to take more advanced AP classes, SAT training, join a team, play a instrument. Parents are doing that because they think it will give their kids an edge to succeed. And that is the great paradox. These are well-intentioned parents. And how many parents do you think are listening wake up in the morning saying, how can I drive my kid nuts? How can I make them want to take drugs? How can I create an eating disorder? How can I get them into substance abuse? How can I stress them out? Parents aren't thinking like that. They're thinking, how can I help my kid? But unfortunately, I mean, you said something very telling. You said there's pressure from other parents to pressure your own kids because it's competitive. And competition is only going to increase. So there's only going to be more pressure put on kids to succeed and perform. And let me differentiate. It's one thing to be able to perform under pressure. Like I want a parent to be able to say to their son or daughter, you have a test tomorrow, you have a big game tomorrow. Let me give you some strategies so that you can perform your best. That's performing in the moment. But when we talk about parental pressure, we are talking about what I see necessary are changes that the parent has to make on a daily basis in terms of how they are interacting with their son or daughter. And those changes fall under communication, parental involvement, and parental warmth. And that's the foundation that all the transformations are based on. They have something to do with parental communication, parental warmth, and parental involvement. Being competitive to what we call their personal best. In other words, many parents put pressure on their kids. Competition is a natural pressure inducer. That's why there's pressure in sporting events. It is a competition. There's a winner and a loser. And many parents, again, in affluent areas, especially in places like Silicon Valley, where parents want their kids to go to an Ivy League school or Stanford or something similar, put pressure on their kids to be better than the other students. I mean, one of the questions I like to ask parents when they think their kids are smart, if kids are so smart, why do they cheat? If smart kids are so smart, why do they cheat? And I would say it is the competition that does that. So parents need to encourage their kids, in my opinion, to get rid of unhealthy pressure, is for a child, teen, to do their best, focus on doing their best rather than beating the other person. Now, how do you bring that down on a concrete level? Let me tell you a story. When my son was in 9th grade, he was doing a project on tornadoes, and he did it all by himself. So he says to me, all right, Dad, if you were my teacher, what would you give me on this? So I looked at it and I said, well, Danny, I want to be very honest with you. If I was your teacher, I'd give you that B-. He pauses for a second and he says, I can live with that. And I didn't know what to say because I thought he was going to say, like his sister, well, how can I turn it into a B+, and so on. Now, a few weeks later, he comes up to me with the same question, this time about a paper. Dad, if you were my English teacher, what would you grade me? And I know that if I say a B, B-, whatever, I can live with that. If I say, I think you can do better, then he's going to say, well, Dad, you always said that. Whatever I do isn't good enough. And that's how many teens feel when their parents start to push them in an unhealthy way. So instead I asked them, I said, well, Danny, let me ask you a question. Is this your best? I said, because if it's not your best, I don't want to see it. Only show it to me when it is your best. And only you know the answer to that. He paused for a second. He says, no, it's not really my best. I said, okay, then don't show it to me. Only show it to me when it's your best. And that's how you can motivate a person to tie in to the child, the teen's own need to do their personal best. And the irony is now he's 31. He'll still ask me to edit some stuff for him when he's writing. And whenever I say, Danny, this is good enough, his response is, I don't want it to be good enough. I want it to really be good. So that's right. Another one is when I said communication, I like to call it going from down communication to up communication around three specific areas. One is praise, one is criticism, and one is questions. And questions are really interesting because if you take a question mark and you turn it on its side, it almost looks like a hook. And many parents use questions like that, debate their kids. Why did you do this? Or why did you do that? And as soon as the kid answers, the parent cuts them off. They already have a response. It doesn't matter what the kid says. And many parents use questions to interrogate. What did you do today? Who did you talk to? What are your assignments? And so on. They're using questions to gather facts, where support parents will use questions to help the teen articulate his or her thoughts and feelings, such as, tell me more. What do you think about this? How could you do this differently? Criticism is another. I mean, most parents, when they give criticism, they think they're giving criticism, but they're really being critical, meaning that they are flaw finding. A big difference between support parents and pressure parents is that when they give criticism, pressure parents focus on the flaw, what the person is doing wrong, rather than telling him or her, how can it be better? How can you improve? A cardinal rule for parents is to remember that criticism always needs to be improvement oriented. Telling your teen what they did wrong does not help. Telling him or her how they can improve does help. People want to improve, but nobody likes to be told what they're wrong. And on a concrete level, one of the phrases you can use is next time. Next time you have a test, maybe you're better off studying 5 days in advance instead of 3. The father saying to his son, next time a ground ball is hit to you, just bend down and block it, rather than, I can't believe you let that ground ball go through your legs. You blew the game. See, that's the kid who will never want to play in Little League again.
Well,
So
and I
those
think
are some
in
ones.
your example, you also talk about the hook and how you could change it to like, how could you catch that ball differently next time?
That's
And
right.
activating their brain falls into how do you get it to be a hook as well, and not that negative criticism. And that it's so deflating when we mean to be helpful as parents, and yet we pull the rug out from our kids all the time.
That's the great thing. Many parents inadvertently put pressure on their kids. For example, the more important you make something, the more pressure a person experiences and the worse they do. It should be clear that nobody does better under pressure. The edge is not to do worse. But that's, again, that performance pressure. So a parent who says, your test is really important, inadvertently, they're increasing the pressure.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive, but the most effective response is for the parent to say, it's just another test. It's no big deal. One of the ways that we all deal with pressure more effectively is when something is less important. If something's not important, you feel very little pressure. This is why elite athletes have the attitude, it's just another game, rather than saying, oh, it's the World Series. It's the most important game I will ever have. So parents should be aware of how inadvertently, even though they have good intentions, of how they put extra pressure on their kids. Who it doesn't help them do better; it helps them do worse.
Mm-hmm. Well, at the end of the book, you have a really nice list of suggestions of how you can help prepare your child with their own skills to deal with that pressure that comes at them. That isn't even parental pressure. You talk about meditation apps and other mindfulness ideas, and sort of like your suggestion about like, it's just another game, it's just another test.
That's right. And also it would be helpful for parents to remind their kids, don't put them in a do or die situation. Like, this is the only opportunity you're ever going to get. This is there's always another opportunity. They should always be thinking in terms of multiple opportunities. And very importantly, and this is so important with parental pressure, and we talk about acceptance. And see, a lot of athletes, when they have their contracts, they have incentive clauses. If they perform at a certain level, they get more money. Well, unfortunately, many parents set up a parental contract like that with their son or daughter, that if you do good, you get goodies, especially love. And if you don't do well, you get nothing. And that the fear of being rejected by your parents and not having their approval is one of the factors that causes teens to do things that are inappropriate, such, for example, as cheating or lying. So it's very important for parents to communicate to their kids that irrespective of how they perform, they're still loved. They're still a worthwhile individual. I would always tell my son and daughter before a test, no matter how you do, you're still my horse is how I would put it. And you see a lot of adults, they do poorly in their job and they define their self-esteem in their job. And if you do bad at work, then they equate that as I am a failure. So it's very important to alleviate unhealthy pressure that the child knows that regardless of how they do, that doesn't mean you can't have high standards, that they will be loved even if they fail. And that's how you start to convert parental pressure into a feeling of support, like a safety net, that you are always going to be there. That doesn't mean that you have to approve of what they're doing, but it does mean that you will be not take away love just because they might be doing something, studying something, living in another part of the country that you do not approve of. But that doesn't mean that you withdraw love in a healthy parent-child relationship.
Yeah, and I tend to spend a lot of time with parents trying to encourage that healthy communication between parent and child. And one of your transformations has to do with that, upping the warmth and the heat and stuff like that.
That's right. And also going from a monologue to a dialogue.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of what parents have to remember is the parent-child relationship is an interaction, just like the relationship they have with their partner. It is an interaction. And that means what the parent does impacts what the child does, and what the child does affects what the kid does. So if a mother or father start yelling at the teen, what do you think the teen's going to do? They will start to yell back. And then, of course, the mother and the father will escalate the situation, and then the teen will escalate, just like in terms of you get into an argument with your partner, that's what happens. And one of the things that happens that pressure parents do is they do not make room for their teen's voice. So they're basically telling them, it's like, listen to what I say, or I don't want to hear what you say, just do it. It becomes a monologue. And when you're dealing with criticism, questions, it's very important that you turn it into a dialogue so that you're having an exchange of opinion, especially in problem solving. Problem solving is an activity that many parents, they don't want to go through the process. They just want to solve the problem and say, here's what you need to do. But problem solving, and it could be, where am I going to go to college, needs to be a dialogue, an exchange of information. Studies show that even if the parents pull rank, if I've had a chance to voice my opinion and my feelings, I'm still okay with that, rather than they don't even want to hear what I have to say. So I think that's going from monologue to dialogue is very important.
Yeah, I had a parent who forced their child to study chemistry and calculus all summer, and they didn't have any interest whatsoever in doing that, but the parent forced them to anyway.
And that goes back again to the beginning, where I said parental expectations, they're parent focused, you have to move them to child focused. And that's a good example, because that's like the parent who says, the parent wanted to be a doctor. Now they're going to make their kid be a doctor, studying things that they have no interest in. Did you ever see the movie Dead Poets Society?
Oh, yeah.
So for those who haven't, Robin Williams is a teacher in an elite private school, and one of his students wants to become an actor. He gets turned on to acting. And when he tells the father, if you remember, the father says, you're not going to be an actor, you're going to be a doctor, and that's it, and no more acting. 10 minutes later, the kid takes out a gun, blows his brains out. That is an example of art imitating life, because that happens. And you use the word force. Remember, that's what pressure is. It is a force. That's why it's in every parent-child relationship. So when you can go through these transformations, remember that parental pressure is defined as expectations that the child or teen thinks are impossible to meet. So if, as a parent, if you say you don't put pressure on your kids, I don't care what you say. I want to talk to your son or daughter. If your son or daughter says they feel pressure from you, you are a pressure parent. If your kids say, if you can think you're the warmest parent in the world, but if your kids say otherwise, you're not the warmest parent in the world. Everything in the area of parental pressure is defined from the kid's point of view. And that's in expectations are the big bang of parental pressure. That's what starts it. Because when you have a little baby and you come home from the hospital, there's no pressure on the baby. The baby's putting pressure on the parents. You're going to stay up all night. You're going to feed me when I want. I'm going to go to the bathroom when I want. But then very gradually, the parents get the kid on their schedule. And that's where the parental pressure starts. Now we're going to do things the parent way. And if you can use parental pressure as how nature intended it to be, then your child will experience it as a source of guidance and support and warmth and motivation. That's how you want them to experience pressure, rather than, I have to do this. Yeah. You know, you can, if a kid doesn't feel, if the parental expectations aren't important, the kid will feel no pressure. I was a terrible, when you see in my bio, I was a terrible high school student because I didn't care. I was having a great time. My father was a story editor of Superman. I was reading Superman comics every single night, watching $1 Million movie of King Kong. Why would I want to study social studies or anything like that? So it wasn't important to me. So I felt no pressure. But few people can blow off those parental expectations. When I was younger, the big movie was Love Story, where the father says to his son, you marry this girl and I give you nothing. That's no different than the contemporary version of Crazy Rich Asians, where the mother says to the son, you marry this girl and you get nothing. So parents put parental pressure. It's not just in the young ages and in areas of whether it's academics or sports or music. It also becomes in their later life in the form of, we'll buy you a house, but we have to approve of the house. We'll pay for the wedding, but we have to approve of the person you are marrying. And what we found is that pressure parents have certain characteristics. I want people to listen to this. One is a sense of urgency. Got to do it now. Hurry up. Another is importance. No matter what the kid is doing, it's the most important thing in the world. Another is competition. You have to be better than the Joneses. See, it's no longer keeping up with the Joneses. Now you have to be better than the Joneses. And the last is perfectionism, that you have to be perfect, and that you have to be perfect because it's a competitive world, and scarcity. So when you see the world that there's few opportunities, so you have to be competitive. And if you're going to be competitive and win, then you have to be perfect, and you better take care of business now because you're not going to have another chance. That is when the child, the teen, will end up going to a therapist. They will need it. That's called hot housing, is the expression.
Really? Yeah, we have lots of anxious teens in our area here, but anxious kids. It's not just any age, like you said, all the way through adulthood. Mm-hmm. I mean, our kids just feel it all the time. And part of it's from our own, like you said, the urgency, like, oh my God, if I don't, as a parent, make this happen. My kid's not going to get into Harvard or Stanford. And it's like, it drives me crazy. And they don't have good communication with their own children and just wrecks the poor kid's psyche.
One of the things parents really have to come to grips with is, why do they want their kid to go to Harvard? Is it for the kid, or is it because for the parents that say, my kid goes to Harvard? Look at the Varsity Blues cheating scandal. It shows you what parents are willing to do. And a lot of that is so that they can brag. I grew up in a very affluent town, competitive, called Great Neck, Long Island. It was very much like Silicon, Valley, same thing. And about 3 years ago, I saw that they had a cheating scandal where 3 kids had paid this other kid to take their SATs for them. And I laughed to myself because it was so predictable. And I said, those are the parents who drive around Great Neck with Harvard, Yale, and Princeton bumper stickers on their car so that everybody can know. So a lot of times, that's why parents many times I've found clinically conflate their aspirations with their expectations. And then they put that on the kid. And then it's always unhealthy because it's always about the parent. It's not about the kid. I tell people, do you think that when you see at a school where it's a 4th generation has gone there, isn't it a coincidence that every kid wanted to go to the same school? You mean none of them? They all wanted to go. None of them wanted to go to Michigan? None of them wanted to go to UCLA? Yeah. Seriously? They all wanted to go? That's the parents. Somebody is sitting at home saying, this is where you are.
Got to get
this
in.
Is where you are going. And I will tell you, we were up in Rhode Island over the weekend. And, here I am on the beach promoting my book, of course. And I start a conversation with this young mother, I could tell. And she tells me she's a lawyer and her husband's a lawyer. And I said, well, you're going to want my book. And as soon as I told her what it was, right on her cell phone, she ordered it because she told me her kid is 2. And she said, it's intense going to preschool. She said, the applications, we have to have interviews. We have to write essays about our kids at 2 years old. That's only going to get more intense because the world is a competitive place. And, another thing that parents should look at is how they define success. It's a very narrow criteria. See, if you get into Harvard, that's successful. You have no idea. I've taught at a lot of top schools of how many clueless kids I've met graduating from the best schools in the country. No idea. Going to an Ivy League school does not guarantee success. But parents think that it does. And a lot of it is because of their own needs. Many parents will say, you can be whatever you want, but the meta message is, it better be something we approve of.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. My sons have been through college already, and one of them went to a top school, and he got there, and he's like, it was so hard to get in here. And then there's all these people who aren't quite top notch. It's like, how did they get in here?
Did you think that you put a lot of pressure, academic pressure on him to succeed?
No, I let him choose. We had good communication, and he, I have one son who was the AP-ish kind of guy, sort of science and math, and he didn't want to take AP English. And I'm like, sounds good to me. Why would you do that? Mm-hmm. And the other son didn't really want to do APs at all. I was like, oh, that's fine. But there's other people in their schools like, oh my God, I have to have 5 APs or 18 AP, all that. And it's like one of my son's best friends was super high performing like that, went to Stanford, and it was like, he had to take a pause because he got a bit burned out from all that pressure long term.
Well, one of the premises that we started with were that there are some kids who are very successful and they're mentally healthy. There are other kids who may be successful or not, but they have mental health issues. And a major factor that differentiated between those two groups was how their parents exerted pressure upon them. And one of the interesting things is we found that the parents of the successful kids, both academically or musically, in whatever their endeavor was, and had no mental health issues, is their parents didn't pressure them to succeed. They pressured them to follow their interests,
Wow.
find something that they like, and then do their best in it.
Yeah. Well, I think your book really sets people up in that direction for thinking about all the different interactions we have as parents with our kids and the opportunities that we have to be supportive parents and to be aware of the pressure, negative parenting that is so easy for us to fall into with all this pressure in our society. And I just want to thank you so much for being on my podcast. I really hope that lots of parents get this book and are able to move in really positive directions.
Thank you for having me, Mary. And I will say that if parents, and I do hope they get the book, but more importantly, I hope that they apply what is in it. Because if they apply what is in it, then that will be a way that I can say to all parents that the force will be with you.
Love it. Love it. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. If you need help and encouragement, you feel free to contact me anytime. My mission is to help parents feel supported and encouraged. You can send me an email to mary@parentingdecoded.com or join my Facebook group, Parenting Decoded 2021. Take care and be safe. Have a blessed rest of your day.